If you are a foxhole player and do not live under a rock, you must know that the foxhole devs have launched the airborne update, adding planes to foxhole, and planes of all shapes and sizes have been added to the game. The devs have added the aircraft carrier also in this update. And a major controversial decision by the dev was to give the colonials a proper naval carrier and wardens a seaplane tender. But was this dev bias, or is there a reason behind this decision? Well, thanks to the CATS and the Warden Air Force regiments, we have an insight into this answer. First, we must understand what planes these ships will be carrying. The Colonial aircraft carrier Poseidon can carry the Colonial fighter and dive bomber. Colonial fighter is a quite fast and reasonably maneuverable plane which can perform effectively in dogfight and interception missions. As a colonial dive bomber, although harder to fly and slower than the fighter, can outperform many of its other bombing counterparts when it reaches its targets and releases its devastating bombing run. The skill required to hit a target during a dive is already pretty high. To carry out a successful strike on a moving ship would be exponentially harder, thus the plane would require skilled aviators to fly. According to information provided, 5 to 6 planes could be carried by a colonial aircraft carrier. It's also been said that it will be harder to land on the carrier, which checks out due to a smaller runway, which will also lead to increased accidental losses. All in all, the carrier force for colonials relies on its offensive capabilities to hit their targets hard and fast. Coming to the Warden Mercy class seaplane tender, it can carry the Warden seaplane fighter and the scout plane. The Sea Fighter is a unique Warden plane. Although not the slowest, it's described as being slower than its counterparts, but its strength lies in its high maneuverability and its ability to turn tight corners. And its 3 center-mounted machine guns are feared by collie pilots. The second plane, Warden Scout plane, is fast and has good range and can carry 2 small torpedoes which can do significant damage to smaller enemy vessels. Both the planes can land on sea as well as on the ground and can be flown and operated with minimal training. According to the information provided, the seaplane tender is to carry more planes than this colonial aircraft carrier. I estimate about 6 to 8 planes can be carried by the ship. In addition to that, it has 3 launch hooks, from which 3 planes can be launched simultaneously at the same time. And for recovery, a crane is utilized. All in all, the seaplane tender heavily relies on its defensive and aerial denial capabilities. According to the capabilities of ships and their planes, the colonials will approach naval aviation with a more offensive approach. A squadron of colonial dive bombers escorted by fighters can easily target and pick off ships in a warden fleet, one by one with minimal damage. These naval air squadrons can also be used to bomb and strafe ground targets, while larger naval ships use their cannons to blast the targets. In a defensive measure, it can also be used to prevent naval invasions by early detections and harassments by longhooks and protection of its own ships in the fleet using fighters. But a problem faced by aviators would be longer time for refueling and rearmament and more chances for accidents due to shorter decks. For wardens, their weaponry being worse in comparison to colonial planes would be most likely to follow a defensive doctrine, intercepting enemy dive bombers with triple machine guns of the Warden Sea Fighter and using the scout planes to prevent enemy smaller vessels from getting too close to the fleet. Being armed with the smaller torpedo gives the scout plane a slight advantage in choosing its target for harassing naval enemy shipping and their brown water fleets, which will be crucial in supporting naval blockades. Their range also gives them an edge in scouting missions. An advantage to having the sea tender would be faster rearmament and refueling speed, as a plane would just have to land in the water near the ship in order to be hooked and brought back. Historically speaking, the colonial navy has been on the backhand when it's come to navy, so the devs using this as a way to balance asymmetric warfare is an interesting approach, as it gives the collies greater offensive capabilities. The wardens, being a natural dominant sea power, having to take a more defensive fleet centric approach is also a way to balance out the naval doctrines of both the factions, according to me. And that brings me to the end of this doctrinal discussion regarding Air Force naval carriers. This was Count Wunderbar signing off.